what I'm suggesting in this video may be somewhat controversial or not reality for most of us. Hey, I'm Dave. After completing the Appalachian Trail, I have a little bit to say about gear that I would have used differently or managed differently while on the Appalachian Trail. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the big four that I used, what I would have done differently with the big four, and other changes that I have that might help you if you are going to hike the Appalachian Trail. But first, I want to talk to you about the nights in the Smokies and the Roan Highlands where I didn't do it right. And hopefully you can learn from my mistake. I was on the edge of, I'll call it hypothermia, but I shook a little bit. I was wet. I was cold. I didn't carry enough food. My pack was too heavy. And if you watched any of my videos, you may not have realized that when I was going through the Appalachian, or on the Appalachian Trail going through the Roan Highlands. But we got hit with some miserable weather, and the gear that I took was not perfect for the situation. It was livable. I made it, but I would have done some different things. So let's talk about the gear that I did use. My big four: Durston X-Mid Pro 2, which is the two-person high-level waterproof tent. The Durston Kakwa 55-liter backpack. The Big Agnes Rapide SL or XL, which is an insulated 4-inch 4.2R value sleeping pad. And then I used the Zen Bivy 25 lightweight quilt. I will leave a link in the description for all of the gear that I used on the Appalachian Trail. But what I want to say about that is the Kakwa 55 was a good pack. Don't get me wrong, I loved it. However, I used the small, which was appropriate for my height, and I felt like the quote winter or end of winter, early spring gear in the Roan Highlands and the Smokies required a lot more wintry type equipment that I wasn't willing to carry. It almost did me in, but I wasn't willing to carry it, and I wasn't really honed in on my food for the trail. So with what I'm trying to get to is I would have done some different things. The Durston Kakwa 55 was perfect for the second half or even 3/4 of the trail. The Durston X-Mid Pro 2 was good for the entire trail, not great for all of the trail, which I'll get to in a moment. The Rapide SL, that by Big Agnes, that was perfect for early on in the trail, and it was a warm sleeping pad. It never deflated on me, which if you watch my videos from last year, my ultralight one that I got later on, that had a leak, and people were like, you got to find the leak, you got to find the leak. And I was like, can't find the leak, can't find the leak. And so I ended up kind of getting less and less sleep as Katahdin got closer and closer. But where am I going with that? My last one was the Zen Bivy sleeping quilt. And up in those mountains with all my dry clothes on, including puffy jacket, hat, gloves, socks, heavy duty socks, pants, etc. I got really cold. I would have, should have, could have put a strap so that it kept the quilt around me, the strap underneath the pad. I didn't, and I should have. Another thing, before I get too much into it, another thing I'd look for to help the Zen Bivy is get a liner. It got colder than I expected it. I had been hiking up in the White Mountains before the trail, on snow, on ice, in 5-10 degree weather with wind chill. But that doesn't mean that I was sleeping there. So I wasn't quite prepared, for the nights. After hiking all day, stripping out of your wet stuff, putting on your dry stuff, and trying to get a nice warm sleep, should have done some things differently. So what about all this controversial talk that I'm going to get into? I feel like the Appalachian Trail is a trail of two distinct trails that you're going to be hiking. And with that said, there could be one kit that you're carrying at the beginning and one kit at the end. What I would have done differently early on, and everybody has their opinion, I get it. This is what I felt like I could have, should have done at the beginning. One, I would have gotten a single person tent. So that is smaller, a little more narrow to hold in some of the heat, a little bit better than my 2-person Durston. So using, a Durston X Mid Pro 1, I think would have been better, because I still could have put my my pack, etc., at the end of the tent, and had enough room to sleep. I think that would have been more beneficial. The Rapide, I would not have changed that out. That's great. I would have most likely gone with a liner for my sleeping quilt and used the straps. And if I didn't want to do that, I could have gone into more of a kind of a wider, more mummy style sleeping bag. But I probably wouldn't have done that, because I like the quilt, I like the room of the quilt. I just would have managed it a little bit better, and maybe bought some of the products to help create more of a bed situation, because Zen Bivy has those options. I just wasn't willing to carry the extra weight. However, with that said, my Durston pack, the Kakwa 55, I felt was not great as a winter type pack. I would have gone, and this is where it kind of gets a little wonky, I would have gone with an Osprey, their ultralight model, where it just would have, I would have been able to carry the pack, heavier loads better. And I did try one on from my friend Frodo on the trail, and he let me try it on when we were at a hostel one day, and it was night and day difference as far as comfort for my compared to my Kakwa. With that said, I would have changed that out, so I would have had a different sleeping backpack. I would have had a smaller tent. I would have had maybe done something with the quilt, or at least given myself a liner and some other protection against the weather. It would have been a little heavier. I feel like the pack could have done that. Then, when it gets warmer and you get to the halfway point, or the proverbial halfway point in West Virginia, I would have switched out to a Kakwa 40, a much smaller pack, gone with some ultralight. My sleeping pad I changed out for an ultralight Thermaret Neo Air ultralight. I changed it out for that. I kept my sleeping bag, and everything from my food, my clothing, I had been paring it down. So that 40 would have carried me all the way to Katahdin. And I think that that's where, yes, if you have unlimited funds, you could go from this one to this one without, with like a good transition into it, assuming you've used this in the winter in the past, and you've used your Kakwa 40 as well. That's something that I would have done. It would have cost a lot of money, but with that said, I'm also in the market going forward for shorter backpack trips. If I'm going to be like not car camping, but doing, like a 3 to 5 day trip where I'm going to carry, more meals to try to stay happier and whatnot. I might get an Osprey, like a 48, for those sort of things. So with that said, yes, it would be very expensive. I did change out some things. The reason why I like the 1 instead of the 2 for the Durston, sorry, I'm kind of all over the place. Just have a lot to say on this. When you get into New England, the White Mountains, you start to get platforms, and you need a special clip for your. I thought I had it here for the platforms when using a trekking pole tent like the X-Mid Pro, and also the X-Mid Pro 2 took up a lot of space on those platforms, so I needed a smaller width, which would have been more beneficial, and that's why I would have done that sort of thing. And some of the other things that I would have changed, this is point 3, if you're taking notes, which you always should, right? Point 3, I spent a lot of the first 3 months, 2 to 3 months, paring down equipment that I didn't need. For example, when you get to Georgia and it's March, I had a March 5th, 6th start date, there's no animals out. The bears were still sleeping. There was nothing for them to eat on the trail. We did everything judiciously. We hung our food, but I would suggest that you don't need bear spray. I never used bear spray. I encountered 3 bears on the trail, all of whom were not happy to meet me there, so they kind of they skedaddled fairly quickly. I was more worried about snakes, because snakes startle you. I don't care who you are. If you're walking along and you hear a snake, especially, a rattlesnake, if you hear a rattlesnake, you jump. I jumped all dozen times I saw a rattlesnake. I jumped some of the times where I saw the black rat snakes, because those things were like 7 feet long and, black as coal, and they started to slither, and it's like they startle you. With that said, you don't need that. I did not use a bug net the entire trail. I had Ben's bug net, and many people would, and they would put it on, and I just felt like I didn't want something like that, so I just had my sun hoodie and put it up over my face, and would pull it in if the bugs were bad. And they were usually only bad for us when I stopped for water. If you're hiking along, they're swarming, but they don't really go after you. So, for example, I think there were 3 types of bugs. There were the deer flies, there were the mosquitoes, and then the no-see-ums. And the mosquitoes would all hover around your ears, so you'd hear them buzzing. The deer flies would go for the back of the head, and you could occasionally get them and, kind of swat them off and kind of kill them as you go. And then the no-see-ums would kind of fly in front of your face, and occasionally they'd take a dive at your eyeball, and I didn't like those the most. But with that said, I would pare down things early. A lot of people talk about shakedown hikes. My pack was not heavy. It just had a lot of little things in it that I didn't need. If you do want to learn more, if you leave a comment, if you have any questions about kind of what to take and what not to take, I'm there for you. I'm here to help. Hopefully you're starting your adventure soon. If not, if the March people, they're already pretty much into Virginia, hopefully by this point. And they're chugging along, and maybe they will benefit from this. But if you haven't started hiking, you want to benefit from it, certainly take some of my advice, compare it with other people's advice, and leave a comment if you have anything else to say. This was video 2 of 5. I will jump right into video 3 in a moment, so stay tuned.